she was young, she was black, she was in love with the wrong man, and he made sure she paid for it. He didn't even have the courage to face her himself. He sent 2 men to her door, 2 men and an envelope. Inside that envelope, a note written in his handwriting, cold and final as a verdict. It said, "Leave Los Angeles. Don't call. Don't come back. What we had is over." And underneath those words, money. Enough money to make it feel like a transaction, like she was a problem he had solved. She sat on the floor of her bathroom that night, in the dark, holding that envelope while the rain came down outside. And she made a decision that he never saw coming. She kept the money. Not because she forgave him, not because she was weak, but because she was already thinking further ahead than he ever gave her credit for. He went back to his empire, his tailored suits, his neck tattoos and his power and his world of shadows where men like him never answer for anything. He married the woman his family approved of. He moved on. He forgot her name the way powerful men forget the people they discard, easily and without looking back. But here is what he didn't know. While he was forgetting her, she was becoming someone he would one day desperately need. While he was living in luxury, she was studying in silence, building something real, building something that no envelope and no rainy night could ever take from her. And then came the night his mother was rushed to the hospital, and the only doctor who could save her life was a name he recognized. Her name. Before starting the story, comment down below where you are watching from and what time it is there. If stories of karma, love, and hidden truths move you, leave a like, be sure to subscribe to the channel, and click Join to become a member and help our channel. There are decisions a person makes in the dark that they believe will never follow them into the light. He made his in a quiet room at a desk with a pen and an envelope and the particular kind of coldness that only comes from choosing convenience over conscience. He did not yell. He did not explain. He wrote a few lines on a piece of paper, folded it carefully, placed it inside the envelope alongside enough money to make it feel like a transaction rather than an abandonment, and handed it to 2 men whose job it was to deliver things he did not want to deliver himself. He told himself it was necessary. He told himself she would be fine. He told himself a lot of things that night, in that quiet room, while the rain came down outside the window, and somewhere across the city, a young woman was sitting in her apartment waiting for a call that was never going to come. Because the call had been replaced by a knock at the door and 2 men in dark jackets and an envelope that said everything he was too much of a coward to say to her face. She had known, somewhere underneath everything, that this was always how it would end. Not because she had expected the worst of him, but because she had seen, in small moments he thought she wasn't watching, how he made decisions. Quickly, cleanly, without looking back. She had admired it once. She understood now that it was not strength. It was the particular efficiency of a man who had never been asked to pay for anything he broke. She sat on the floor of her bathroom for a long time that night, not crying immediately. That came later. First, there was just silence and the sound of the rain and the weight of an envelope in her hands that smelled faintly of his cologne. She opened it, read the note once, read it again, set it down on the tile floor, and then she did something that would define the next 10 years of her life more than any single moment before or after it. She picked it back up, and she kept the money. Not out of bitterness, not out of surrender, out of something colder and more determined than either of those things. She looked at those bills and she thought, with a clarity that surprised even her, that she had given 2 years of her life, 2 years of her love, 2 years of believing in someone who kept her in a room with no windows and called it protection. She had earned something. And if this was all she was going to get, then she was going to use every last dollar of it to build something he could never touch, could never dismiss, could never fold into an envelope and hand to someone else to deal with. She left Los Angeles 3 days later with 2 suitcases and an acceptance letter she had deferred twice because of him, though she had never admitted that to herself until she was already on the highway, watching the city disappear in the rearview mirror. Baltimore received her like cities receive people who arrive with nothing to lose, indifferently and completely. She found a small apartment near campus that smelled like old wood and someone else's cooking. She learned the name of every professor before the first week ended. She studied in ways she had never allowed herself to study before, with a ferocity that her classmates found either inspiring or unnerving, depending on how competitive they were. She did not talk about Los Angeles. She did not talk about him. When people asked where she was from, she said California, and left it there like a door she had locked from the outside. The years passed the way years pass when a person is building something. Not quickly, not slowly, but with the particular texture of time that is made entirely of work. Examinations, residencies, sleepless nights that had nothing to do with heartbreak, and everything to do with a body on a table that needed her to be better than she had ever been before. She became Dr. Caldwell on a Tuesday morning in May, in an auditorium full of people who had no idea what it had cost her. She wore a gold bracelet she had bought herself the night before. She did not invite anyone. She did not need to. The St. Harlow Medical Center does not look like a place where lives are decided. It looks, from the outside, like most buildings that take themselves seriously. Clean lines, glass panels that catch the morning light and throw it back at you. A quiet authority that does not need to announce itself. Inside, it smells like antiseptic and recycled air, and the particular kind of urgency that never fully leaves a place where people arrive broken and hope to leave home. She had walked its corridors for 3 years as chief of nephrology, and in that time the hospital had shaped itself around her the way spaces do around people who belong in them completely. The nurses knew her coffee order and the specific silence she needed before a complex surgery. The residents knew that her feedback was never cruel, but was always honest, which in many ways was harder to receive than cruelty. The administration knew that when Dr. Caldwell was assigned to a case, the case was in the best hands available. Not the best hands in the building, but among the best in the country. They had the published papers and the outcomes data to prove it. She was reviewing post-operative notes at her desk when the call came through from the floor. The admitting physician's voice was measured, but carried the particular undertone that experienced doctors use when a case is serious enough to require someone better than themselves. Bilateral renal failure, progressive, elderly female patient, deterioration accelerating. The window for surgical intervention was narrow and closing. There was no one else in the hospital that week with the specific surgical profile the case demanded. She was already standing when she reached for the chart the nurse brought to her door. She did not look at the name immediately. She asked about the imaging first, then the blood panel, then the timeline of symptom onset. She was building the medical picture the way she always built it, from the inside out, from the data toward the person. Because the data did not have feelings, and the data would not make her hesitate. She had learned early in her training that hesitation in the wrong moment is its own kind of decision, and she had spent years training herself out of it. Then she looked at the name. Chun. Young-Cha Chun. The chart stayed perfectly still in her hands. Her face stayed perfectly still as well, which was not nothing. It was, in fact, the result of a decade of building a self that could not be knocked sideways by a name on a piece of paper. She was aware of the nurse watching her. she was aware of her own breathing. She took one moment, just one, and then she closed that particular door inside herself with the same quiet efficiency she had learned, ironically, from him. She went to see the patient first. The woman in the bed was smaller than she had imagined, though she had never consciously imagined her at all. Delicate in the way that age makes people delicate. Not frail, exactly, but reduced to something more essential. The unnecessary parts of a person worn away until only the core of them remains. She had hands that told a whole life story without a single word. Hands that had worked. Hands that had held things together when everything around them was pulling apart. They spoke quietly. She explained the procedure in terms that were honest without being frightening, which is one of the most difficult things a physician can do, and one of the things she had spent the longest learning. The older woman listened with her whole face, the way people listen when they understand that the information matters, and that the person delivering it has earned the right to deliver it. When she stood to leave, the woman reached out and held her hand for just a moment. The grip was gentle, but certain. She returned the pressure without thinking, the way the body sometimes responds before the mind has time to complicate things. She was 3 steps into the corridor when she saw him. He was standing near the wall, the way large men stand in spaces that were not built for the kind of weight they carry. Slightly apart from everything. Not leaning, not restless, just present in the particular way of someone who has learned that stillness reads as power. The suit was black. The shirt was white with 2 buttons open at the collar. The watch caught the fluorescent light for a fraction of a second before she looked away from it. The tattoo on his neck she did not need to look at. She already knew exactly what it looked like. He saw her at the same moment she saw him. And for the space of 2 full seconds, Chun Hyun-soo, a man who had built an empire on the ability to show nothing, showed everything. She kept walking. The consultation room was small and deliberately neutral, the kind of room designed to hold difficult conversations without amplifying them, with soft lighting and chairs arranged at a table that was neither too formal nor too intimate. She had sat in this room hundreds of times. She had delivered news in this room that changed the entire shape of a person's life in under 10 minutes. She knew every corner of it. She had never walked into it feeling like the walls were closer than they should be. He sat across from her. His hands were flat on the table. Not folded, not fidgeting, just flat. The way a man places his hands when he is concentrating very hard on appearing composed. She recognized the effort because she was making the same one. The difference was that she had been practicing for 10 years, and he had only had the last 3 minutes. She opened the chart. She began to speak. She told him everything his mother's body was doing, and everything it needed, in language that was precise without being cold, thorough without being excessive. She watched him process it the way people process medical information about someone they love, the slight tightening around the eyes when the severity registers, the moment where the practical mind tries to take over from the emotional one and only partially succeeds. She had seen this hundreds of times. She told herself that watching him go through it was no different from watching anyone else. She told herself that with some conviction. When she finished, the room held the particular silence of information that has just landed and not yet been absorbed. He looked at the table for a moment. Then he looked at her. His voice, when it came, was lower than she remembered. Or perhaps she had simply forgotten the specific register of it, the way it sat in the chest rather than the throat, the way it had once had the ability to make her feel like the only person in a crowded room. He said her name. Not the name on her badge. Her name. The one he had no remaining right to use. spoken with a familiarity that had not been earned in the present tense and could not be borrowed from the past. She corrected him without raising her voice, without any heat in it at all, which was somehow more final than anger would have been. She watched him receive the correction. She watched him accept it, which was not something she had ever seen him do easily with anything. She told him what needed to happen. She told him the timeline. She told him that his mother's prognosis, given successful intervention, was good. She told him all of this looking directly at him, because looking away would have meant something she was not willing to let mean anything. When she stood to leave, he asked her the question she had known was coming since the moment she saw his name attached to a patient file. The question underneath all the other questions, the one that had nothing to do with medicine. He asked her why she would do this. She stopped. She did not turn around immediately. She let the question sit in the air of the room for a moment, not because she didn't know the answer, but because she wanted to give it only once, cleanly, without anything attached to it that didn't belong there. She told him that his mother had done nothing. She told him that she had not spent a decade becoming who she was in order to make decisions based on who had hurt her. That the day she allowed her past to override her judgment in that room, in any room, was the day she would have lost something that no person, and no envelope, and no rainy night in Los Angeles had ever been able to take from her. She told him this without drama, without tears, without the trembling voice of someone who needed him to understand the weight of what she was saying. She said it the way she signed her name on a surgical consent form, with complete authority, with the particular confidence of a woman who had written her own story in a language he didn't have the vocabulary to read. Then she left him in that room. The surgery was scheduled for 6 the following morning. She spent the hours before it the way she always spent the hours before a complex procedure. Reviewing, preparing, running through every possible variable with the systematic calm of someone who had made peace with uncertainty by learning to be ready for it. She did not think about him. She thought about the woman in the bed. She thought about those hands. He sat in the waiting room all night. She knew because the charge nurse mentioned it, offhandedly, the way people mention things they think are incidental. She said nothing in response. She filed the information somewhere quiet and did not open it again. At 6 in the morning, she scrubbed in. At 12:47 in the afternoon, she scrubbed out. The surgery had gone exactly as she had planned it would. She found him standing exactly where she expected, outside the surgical wing doors, in the same suit he had been wearing the night before, the tie loosened now in this single visible concession to the fact that he had not slept or eaten or been anywhere other than that waiting room for the better part of 18 hours. There were no men in dark jackets behind him this time. He had sent them away at some point during the night, which she suspected was not something he did often or easily. He looked at her face before she said a word, the way people look at a doctor's face when they have spent hours rehearsing for both possible versions of the next 10 seconds. She told him his mother had come through well. She told him the procedure had achieved what it needed to achieve, that the renal function was responding, that the next 48 hours would require careful monitoring, but that the trajectory was good. She told him all of this standing in the corridor under fluorescent light, with her surgical cap still in her hand, because she had come to find him before doing anything else, and she did not fully examine why. He did not speak immediately. He looked at the floor for a moment in the way that men who have never learned to cry do when something moves through them that has nowhere to go. His jaw was tight. His hands, at his sides, were closed into fists that were not angry. they were the fists of someone holding themselves together by force of will alone. Then he looked up at her, and what was on his face was not relief, though relief was there. What was mostly on his face was something older and heavier, and far less comfortable than relief. It was the particular expression of a person who has just been shown, without a single word of accusation, the precise shape of their own failure. He told her he needed to say something. She told him he didn't. He told her she was right, and that he was going to say it anyway. She waited. He spoke slowly, without the practiced smoothness she remembered from a version of him that had always known exactly what effect his words were having. This was different. This was a man without a strategy, which, for someone like him, was perhaps the most vulnerable thing he could possibly be. He told her that what he had done 10 years ago was not a decision he had made under pressure or without options, that he had known, in the moment he made it, that it was wrong, and that he had made it anyway because wrong had been easier than the alternative, and that he had told himself enough stories about necessity and circumstance to avoid looking directly at what it actually was. He said the word cowardice without being prompted. He said it quietly, and he did not soften it or follow it with an explanation. And she understood that this cost him something real, not because he was performing humility, but because humility was genuinely foreign to him, a language he was speaking for only the second or third time in his life. She listened to all of it. When he finished, the corridor was very quiet. Somewhere down the hall, a monitor beeped its steady, indifferent rhythm. The light was the same light it had always been, flat and institutional and completely uninterested in the conversation happening beneath it. She looked at him for a long moment, not with warmth, not with coldness, but with something that was perhaps more devastating than either, with clarity. The clarity of a woman who had processed this particular grief so completely over so many years and in so many early morning hours that there was nothing left in it that could destabilize her. She had already done every hard thing this moment could have asked of her. She had done them alone, in a different city, across a decade, in the margins of a life she had built without him. She told him that she heard him. She told him that she believed he meant it. And then she told him something that she had never said to anyone, had perhaps never fully said to herself, that she had spent a long time being angry at the wrong thing, that she had been angry at him, when the more honest thing was that she had been angry at herself for staying as long as she had, for deferring things that mattered, for allowing someone else's comfort to quietly become the ceiling of her own life. She told him that leaving, even the way she had been made to leave, had given her back to herself, and that she was not going to thank him for it because it had been brutal and he had been a coward, and both of those things were true. But she was also not going to carry it anymore, not in here, not in this building, not in the place where she had built something real. She picked up the surgical cap she had been holding the entire time and turned toward the locker room. He called after her. Not her title this time. Her name. Just her name. The way it sounds when someone says it and means it as an apology and a goodbye at the same time. She paused, just for a moment, her back still to him. Then she kept walking. Down the corridor, past the nurse's station, past the rooms where people were fighting their way back to their lives, past the window at the end of the hall that showed a sky that had gone, sometime in the last hour, from gray to a pale and uncomplicated blue. She did not look back, not because she was still broken, but because she was not. Because the woman who would have looked back, the one who had sat on a bathroom floor with an envelope and a broken heart and rain on the window, That woman had made it here, had carried herself step by careful step all the way to this corridor, this morning, this particular blue sky. And she had done it without him watching. That was the point. That had always been the point. The locker room door closed behind her, softly, like the last page of something that had finally been allowed to end. In the waiting room, a man who owned more than most people could imagine sat down in a plastic chair and stared at his own hands. The hands of someone who had held everything and still, somehow, managed to let the only thing that mattered walk away twice. The monitor down the hall kept its rhythm. The building kept moving around him. And Dr. Serena Caldwell scrubbed her hands clean, the way she did after every surgery, thoroughly, methodically, until there was nothing left on them that didn't belong there. Serena didn't walk back into that hospital as a broken woman. She walked in as Dr. Caldwell. And the difference between the girl sitting on that bathroom floor, holding an envelope in the dark, and the woman who saved a life without flinching, was not talent. It was not luck. It was a decade of choosing herself, every single day, when no one was watching, when there was no applause. That story moved you for a reason, because somewhere in you, there is a woman who has also been overlooked, made to feel like she was past her prime, like the best years were behind her. She is not past anything. She is just getting started. And after 45, your skin deserves to reflect exactly who you are becoming. Korean Glass Skin Secrets for Black Queens 45 Plus is a complete system built specifically for mature black skin. You'll get the full AM and PM Korean routine adapted for your skin. The 15 star ingredients that actually work for hyperpigmentation and collagen loss. A 30-day challenge that builds everything step by step. The glass hair ritual for type 4C and 4B mature hair. 7 chimchilbang spa rituals you can do at home. And 12 Korean botanical teas, including the viral Korean retinol tea that work on your skin from the inside out. Inside and outside, scalp to soul, morning to night. Serena built herself in silence, with the right tools, and she showed up one day and changed everything. You have that same capacity. Scan the QR code on screen now, or find the link in the description and in the pinned comment below. Your ritual starts today. If this story moved you, stop for a moment and reflect. Have you ever been dismissed, pushed aside, or made to feel like you were less than you were worth? Only to prove, quietly and completely, that you were always more than they could see. And have you ever had to choose between what was easy and what was right, knowing that the person who hurt you was watching, waiting to see who you truly were? Tell us your experiences and feelings in the comments. We read them all. And if you believe in stories about dignity, karma, and redemption, leave a like. Be sure to subscribe to the channel and click Join to become a part of our community and help the channel.